You know that moment when your phone lights up with someone's name and instead of feeling happy, you feel a small wave of tiredness? You look at the message, you think about replying, but then you lock your phone and place it down beside you. Not because you dislike the person, not because you're angry, but because something inside you quietly says, I just don't have the energy for this right now. Over time, the list of people you talk to slowly becomes smaller. Old conversations fade, group chats stay silent on your screen, and from the outside, it can look like you suddenly decided to cut everyone off. But here's the strange part. For many people, cutting everyone off doesn't happen because they stopped caring. It often happens because they cared for too long without feeling the same care back. For a long time, people who go through this experience think something is wrong with them. They wonder why conversations that once felt normal now feel heavy. They wonder why replying to messages feels like effort. They may even look at others who seem socially active and think, why can't I be like that? But psychologists have been noticing something important for a long time. Human beings don't only react to big moments in relationships, our minds react to patterns that repeat over time. Your brain is always quietly observing emotional experiences. It notices who listens when you speak. It notices who only reaches out when they need help. It notices who checks in on you when things are quiet. And it notices who disappears when you stop being the one who initiates everything. None of these moments seem dramatic on their own, but the brain doesn't only remember events, it remembers patterns. Here's the part most people miss. Your brain doesn't always react immediately when it sees these patterns. Sometimes it collects them quietly over months or even years. Small disappointments, conversations where you were the one listening the entire time, situations where you gave emotional support but rarely received the same support back. Individually, these moments feel too small to end a relationship, but when the same experience repeats again and again, the brain slowly adjusts how much energy it's willing to give. This is where things begin to change, not in a dramatic way, not with a confrontation or a big argument. The change often happens quietly. One day you don't reply to a message. Another day you cancel a plan because you feel mentally tired. Weeks pass and you realize you haven't reached out to anyone in a while. And strangely, nothing terrible happens. Life continues. The world keeps moving. And that realization can feel both peaceful and sad at the same time. People often assume that someone who cuts everyone off must be antisocial or emotionally closed, but when psychologists look closely at this behavior, they often notice something different. Many people who withdraw socially were once the most emotionally available person in their circle. They were the listener, the helper, the person everyone called when they needed advice or comfort. Being that person can feel meaningful for a long time. It can even become part of your identity. But emotional energy works a lot like a battery. Every conversation where you support someone uses a small amount of energy. Every time you carry someone else's problems or feelings, that battery drains a little more. Normally, that isn't a problem, because healthy relationships recharge that battery. The other person listens back. They ask how you are. They show up when you need support. But when the recharge rarely happens, something subtle begins to shift inside the mind. The brain starts protecting the little energy it has left, and interestingly, it usually doesn't do this through anger. It does it through distance. Instead of confronting people, the mind simply pulls back. Fewer replies, fewer conversations, more silence. From the outside, it can look like someone suddenly stopped caring, but inside, it often feels more like emotional exhaustion finally asking for space. This is why cutting people off can feel peaceful and sad at the same time. On one hand, life becomes quieter. There are fewer expectations, fewer conversations, fewer emotional demands. That quiet can feel like relief, almost like turning down the volume in a room that has been loud for years. But at the same time, the quiet can also make you notice something else. You may begin to wonder what would happen if you stopped reaching out completely. Would anyone check on you first? Would anyone notice the silence? For many people, this becomes a moment of realization. They discover that some relationships were only active because they were the one maintaining them. They were the ones sending the messages. They were the ones starting the conversations. And when that effort stops, the connection fades too. This realization isn't always dramatic or painful. Sometimes it's simply clarifying. It shows you which relationships were built on shared effort and which ones quietly depended on you carrying most of the emotional weight. That awareness can change how someone thinks about connection altogether. Another interesting psychological shift also happens when someone withdraws from constant social interaction. Their attention slowly moves inward again. When you're always responding to messages, managing conversations, and keeping relationships active, your mind is constantly focused on other people. Psychologists sometimes call this external attention. Your energy is directed outward most of the time. But when someone steps back socially, that attention begins to return inward. They start noticing their own thoughts more clearly, their own emotions, their own boundaries. For some people, this can feel unfamiliar at first, but it can also feel grounding, like rediscovering parts of yourself that got lost in constant social noise. Over time, people who become comfortable with this quiet space often develop something that many others struggle with. They become comfortable sitting with their own thoughts. That might sound simple, but many people feel uncomfortable when things become silent. They immediately reach for their phone. They search for conversation. They try to fill the empty space. But people who spend time in solitude slowly realize that silence isn't always something to escape from. It can be a place where the mind processes experiences, where emotions settle, where new ideas appear without interruption. This doesn't mean these people no longer want relationships. Humans naturally seek connection, but the type of connection they want often changes. Instead of many shallow interactions, they begin wanting fewer but deeper relationships, conversations that feel real, people who listen as much as they speak, relationships where emotional effort moves in both directions instead of only one. And that's why the psychology of people who cut everyone off is often misunderstood. From the outside, it can look like rejection of others, but internally, it's often a quiet process of understanding emotional energy, boundaries, and what kind of connections truly feel meaningful. If you've ever found yourself slowly stepping away from people and wondering why, you're far from the only one who has experienced this shift. Many people move through a period in life where their social world becomes smaller but clearer, where they stop chasing every connection and start noticing which ones actually matter. And sometimes that quiet space isn't a sign that something is wrong. Sometimes it's simply the mind creating room to understand itself again. If this reflection put words to something you've quietly experienced, you can subscribe and stay connected for more conversations like this. Not because anyone here needs fixing, but because understanding human behavior can sometimes make our own experiences feel a little less confusing.